Good evening and welcome back to Africa News Network First Fast Live. My name is Cindy Mabi. The registration process for the 2019 elections begins this weekend, and the dates for the general elections have not been announced as yet, but political parties have already switched to election mode. The governing party was the first off the block with their election workshop over the weekend, and the Economic Freedom Fighters also kicked off their voter registration drive on Sunday. The Democratic Alliance has also started doing the groundwork for next year's national elections. And as the strategic planning and footwork begins to convince voters, these are the challenges the leading parties seek to address. The ANC is looking to restore its image and voter base that has taken a beating as seen in the last municipal elections. And the DA's greatest challenge will be to make further inroads in the black electorate and remain appealing to its traditional voter base. And Julius Malema's fighters have to grow beyond just being the third largest party and work on their image.
The campaign goal is to ensure decisive victory for the ANC. And we're not chasing two-thirds majority. I hear people talking about two-thirds. ANC doesn't talk about two-thirds. ANC talks about overwhelming victory, which is going to come from our hard work and engaging with our people. We don't take our people for granted. And it is not a given that the ANC will get this majority. Not at all. We've got to work hard, address the concerns of our people. That is why our research says that we must deal with perceptions of corruption. It is not for us to argue with our people about whether or not we are perceived to be corrupt or not. It is the action that we are going to take about some of our members who might be implicated in corrupt activities. What is our attitude?
President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on all South Africans, irrespective of age, to visit their voting stations to register, and voting stations will be open between 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. over the weekend.
Fellow South Africans, the journey to the 6th general election has started. We all have a responsibility as South Africans to play our part in strengthening our democracy and building an ever better and prosperous South Africa. This starts with registering to vote. This weekend, the 10th and the 11th of March, all voting stations will be open for new voter registration and for those who are already registered to check and update their details. I especially urge you, young people, to register so that you may play your own part in defining your future. If you are 17 years old and above, or will be voting for the first time, go and register. If you have moved from one place to another, go and register as well. If you have moved from one part of your township, your suburb, or a rural area, go and register. If you have voted before, you can also verify your details on the voters' roll by SMSing your ID number to 32810. Home Affairs offices will be open this Saturday and Sunday. I urge you to go and collect your ID to register to vote. In this, the year of Nelson Mandela, let us deepen democracy and public participation in the affairs of our country. It starts with registering to vote.
And joining us in studio, Edward Mitole, political analyst. We have Mpho Matebola, political analyst via Skype. Thabo Mutle, ANC Youth League NEC member on the phone line. Siso Mahlangu, group political editor in studio. Good evening, gentlemen, and thanks so much for joining us. It really just feels like it's been a continuation of 2017 with all the developments there. Before we know it, we're going to the polls again to vote. If you were to assess the groundwork, the strategic press conferences, etc., of the parties, how would you gauge them? I'll start with you very briefly, Sviso.
Well, I think it's a continuation from 2016, from the August 3rd elections, the municipal elections, that brought us the rivalry and the marriage, the inconcerted or incorporated marriages between the different ideological parties, the EFF and the DA, in a strange move in Joburg, Nelson Mandela Bay, the city of Tshwane. That was not expected, and it happened. And some of the municipalities had done really well. Some are still under challenge. Athol Trollip is probably out, as the EFF leader has declared yesterday. So I think it started there. In 2017, epitomized that, with fights being taken to the Constitutional Court, landing in the resignation of President Jacob Zuma because of the factions and the fightings of the ANC that took itself to Parliament. We're now about a year before the 2019 elections, and I think the top leading parties, the three parties, the ANC, the DA, and the EFF, have all got to work. The ANC, however, in this case, has got to work to redefine itself, to show society that they are still the radical party of Chris Hani and Oliver Tambo. The DA must also be the anti-racist party. They must be a party that appeals to young black people. And the EFF has got to show South Africans that they are not just toddlers screaming in Parliament, but they are people ready for government. So all these parties have got to take some form or shape, sort of resembling the other party, but a lot of movement has to come in the top three leading political parties in this country.
Yeah, and it all leads, it's indicative of a maturing democracy. If you were to think back in 1994, there were all sorts of parties that just emerged, the KISS party, the Dacha party, the soccer party, all sorts of things. We're seeing new players, and we believe that Black First, the Land First have made their way onto the ballot paper. So it's all good because it is more choice for the voter, but it's in how the parties position themselves in the greater interests of the majority of South Africans. Your view, Mr. Matole, whether the ANC can have the decisive victory, as we hear from Minister Fikile Mbalula.
The people who still have trust and faith in the ANC must hold the ANC accountable in the understanding that Amandla Awe too, Malkla Arona, power to the people. So it's a big challenge for the ANC to be able to win the masses back again after what has happened in the past 2 years. This is a theater of politics. It's a theater of politics because we know that the elite class of rulers who have been hired to hypnotize the black masses and numb us into believing that political power without economic power is real freedom, have to come to the party and convince the masses that we are going to deliver economic power alongside political power. So it is a very challenging time for the ANC. Moving into the elections.
Yes, is the ANC a leader of society still, as it claims, and the fact that in its 106 years, it has the machinery, it's got the know-how and the experience to govern, but of course economically we are still disenfranchised. Is it in a position, in your view, with the radical economic transformation talk, able to restore that sense of confidence in the party?
Well, I disagree with some speakers and political scientists on the ANC sort of reclaiming its power from the people on what has happened to the ANC. And I often have to ask people, what has happened to the ANC? Because in 2014, I think the ANC won, and they won well, and they're still the leader of society. Now, there's a narrative that's perpetuated in media called propaganda. The ANC has fallen, the splits in the ANC, the party has died. But the polls in 2014 showed a different thing. And maybe they will once again in 2019. And I think as society, we must be careful of the Twitter feeds and what people say, around this country to be indicative of the ANC that might not necessarily be true. I think when you study the dynamics and the voter dynamics in this country, the people who vote for the ANC are not Twitter users. they're in the homesteads, basemhlabu yalingana, enkandla, everina, empumalanga, emalahleni, Siyabuso. Those places are where the voter majority is. And perhaps that's why they lost in the city of Joburg and the city of Tshwane, because they don't have a voter majority anymore, because it's still a very strong party at the grassroots. And now the EFF coming along with, the Twitterati really minister to their voter market, because they've studied that intrinsically. The DA, however, has got to also convince young black women, young individuals in this country, not just the affluent, but also those in the homestead, to say, we are not the NNP or the reincarnate of the National Party. We're a party for all people in this country. I think we must understand that people in this country vote for different reasons. Some people vote for a black party simply because they're black. Some people did not vote in 2016, not because they hated the ANC, but they didn't vote because they didn't necessarily have a choice. Some people voted for the EFF to teach the ANC a lesson. Some people voted for the DA because they were fed up with some reason. So there's a lot of reasons why people vote, and I think we need to study that.
Yes,
and
Mr.
understand the diagrams.
We'll come back to you in a bit. Paul Matebola, political analyst, has been very patient. And we also have Thabo Motle, ANC Youth League, NEC member. Let's start with you, Mr. Matebola. In your view on the voter apathy and certain challenges that face all political parties to prove that the one is a lesser evil than the other one, everything that has been said about the ruling party, of course, occupying headlines, saying that it's declared dead on arrival, it lost all, its support at Nasrec, etc., or being slow in economic transformation. Your view on the electioneering that we're already seeing?
Good evening, everyone. I think the moral relativism analysis that we need to draw here, it is the pre-ANC and the post-ANC Nasrec. You will understand that there was a huge opprobrium under President Jacob Zuma. But since Nasrec, you can see the euphoria, you can see the growth, you can see the progression, you can see that the ANC is trying by all means to recover its ground in terms of the voters. Now, when you do the trajectory analysis in terms of confidence in the ANC, that is growing very fast. But they still have groundwork to do to prove themselves, to be able to say that they can take about 2/3 majority or anything. But I think the big issue here, Cindy, it is the narrative. You see, I'm asking myself where I'm sitting, and I'm asking everybody, and I say, but what will be the narrative of the EFF? Because it has existed over time because of Jacob Zuma. COPE has existed because of Polokwane. Now, what will be their key narrative that begins to break the eyes of the...
Mr. Matebola, I'm afraid we're going to have to let you go. The audio and the visual quality is not so great. We'll try and get you back into the debate. And Paul Matebola, political analyst via Skype, and we do apologize for that poor quality in audio and visuals. Thabo Motle, lekai?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm very, very well. Hey, 2019 is here. Feel it. It's here. Just judging by the confidence that we're seeing amongst the change of leadership within the ANC structures and narratives around the party self-correcting and organizational renewal. How would you say it's going so far?
Everything is going well so far. We need not get ahead of ourselves. At this point, the ANC is readying itself towards 2019 election. But we are quite aware that for us to go and campaign for people to go and vote the ANC, we must not jump one important step of ensuring that we get those people registered, so that when we come and ask them to vote for the ANC, we vote for people who are already registered. Therefore, the ANC is very much aware it has established structures across the country, from the NET to BET. Structures are in place, VD coordinators across the country, structures are in place, and volunteers are ready to actually engage in this electioneering campaign or moved.
But hasn't the EFF taken the wind out of your sails with the land expropriation without compensation narrative, in that they're the ones who are claiming victory for it, at least even seeing the time of day, or that it has more gravitas?
Claiming is victory will not get voters to vote for your party. The issues that have been debated in the ANC have been in the ANC for quite a long time. The resolution were taken in the conference that we need to expropriate land without compensation. Whether people take advantage of that for them to be popular, it's not what the ANC wants to achieve. We want to see the ANC implementing the resolutions that are taken by the 54th conference. If others are just dancing to that tune, they are doing that at their own accord. So we cannot blame them, we cannot criticize them, but the ANC must remain focused in achieving or implementing the resolution taken by Congress.
All right, please stay on the line. I want Mr. Mthole and Mr. Mahlangu here to engage you that it cannot be just a given anymore, that it will be a convincing victory. There still has to be a lot of groundwork that the ruling party needs to do. In your view, how do you see, especially the EFF, they came to disrupt what was otherwise a given, of a two-party state, if you like, and they have grown and they're making the right noise, they have representation, that you cannot undermine their ability or influence of being kingmakers?
Let's forget the theory that all political parties are here to play games and assume that they are really here to economically empower the black people of Africa. The EFF comes across as a party that started on a sound promise, but somewhere along the way to heaven, I think something happened on the way to heaven. And
was there a staircase?
Yes, I think, So we don't know what went wrong with the EFF, but I think somewhere along the line they lost their founding principles, they lost their cardinal pillars, or maybe the cardinal pillars lost the EFF. And it so happened that they aligned themselves with the racist DA, which is looked at across the divide as a racist party which is there to advance the interests of white capital in this country. So they lost that momentum. But we have seen, I think, in the last few months, the EFF picking itself up again, redeeming itself, and now it's appropriating its original rhetoric.
Yeah, but the right of association, I mean, you can criticize any party, the DA, unfairly or fairly so, but they've also managed to make inroads in growing their black voter base.
No, this time it has made a very big dent on the EFF, because the right of association should be looked at in context. But in the context of aligning with the racist DA, a party that has historically advanced the interest of the very same apartheid oligarchs, people who have perpetrated Holocaust against our people. It's a very big dent to the EFF, and people will find it very difficult to forgive the EFF for that, unless it makes steps, very, very quick steps, to recover its original momentum in terms of its
But the same
pillars.
could be said of the ANC under the Government of National Unity, that at the time, National Party members were absorbed in the party, all in the spirit of reconciliation and redefining the future and destiny of South Africa. So do you think that the traditional voter base still votes based on race, still votes based on largely our historical baggage?
Well, it does. We still very much in this country vote on color. And for some South Africans, particularly those who've suffered under apartheid and who felt the boot of apartheid on their necks, who were there in 1976, who understand the struggle songs and who get a nostalgia when the videos of Hector Peterson and Kunta Kinte are played. Those people will still see South Africa in black, green and yellow. But for some, I think ideologies are changing. There's a shift in the political makeup of this country. And maybe that's not such a bad thing, because alliances must evoke in politics. And maybe it's not so bad that the EFF sided with the DA in some things. And maybe it's not so bad that that marriage is going to collapse. We all know some marriages are good, but sometimes divorce is an option. So there's always a necessary contingent. There's always a necessary irritation. And I think the EFF has been that to the ANC. As much as sometimes we would dismiss the EFF for joining or, a coalition of sorts with the DA, why did the ANC not implement radical economic transformation and expropriation of land for 23 years? Even when they had two-thirds majority, they still failed to do it. They had a president and two-thirds majority, and the president wrote beautiful poetry, but there wasn't implementation of radical policy. And I think the EFF, as a child of the ANC, had to introduce those manifestos. And I think as a South African, and many of us should come to this point, we don't mind who brings the bread and the land should come.
All right, Thabo Motle, just your response so that you're now going to have to woo and almost persuade the EFF on many matters, because you cannot discount their influence and an ability to either allow an all-out majority, or either way you need them. Would you agree?
No, it depends. It depends. There will be engagement with everybody who agrees with a particular direction that the ANC wants to take. So it can be the EFF that is persuaded, because where we don't agree with the EFF, it shall be as such that we do not agree. But where they agree with the ANC, they must also not shy away from saying publicly that they are agreeing with the ANC.
So answer this question, that when the ANC has been in power for 23 years, no implementation or slow on economic transformation, why must voters now be persuaded differently that things will change?
The ANC has been through different challenges and stages since its existence. Therefore, the material conditions are the ones that are dictating what the ANC needs to do for it to continue to be relevant to society. Therefore, it's not a genesis of some sort where there was a word and say the ANC could say, let there be everything for everybody. It's a process.
All right, Thabo Motle, ANC Youth League NEC member, we thank you, Raulebo Khatata, for joining us on the phone line. We'll wrap it up here in studio, Mr. Matole.
Does the ANC have the ideological tools to implement the policies that have been passed by the 54th conference? I don't think so. Does the ANC have the structure to implement the policies that have been passed by the 54th conference of the ANC? I don't think so. We have to be reminded of the wise words of Julius Nyerere, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, who said that white people are not prepared to fight and kill each other for the plunder of African resources anymore. White people or white capital is going to arm one black brother against another black brother. There will be no Holocaust for the white people anymore. It's going to be one black brother killing one black brother. What is happening now is the same strategy of divide and rule, which has been there for ages. All political parties in South Africa and other African countries are funded by the same masters. The reason why the ANC has been unable over the decades to implement the policies or to kickstart the second revolution is because the same masters who are funding political parties have got an agenda. And this agenda cannot be implemented by a radical pro-black party. The coming in of the EFF onto the scene serves an agenda. And the agenda is to appropriate a narrative, to advance a discourse. So the EFF is there to play a role, funded by the same master, to ensure that the black masses are numbed and hypnotized into sleep to prevent them from using violence against the land thieves. So the EFF is playing a role that would discourage black people from using violence against the land thieves. There will be no expropriation of land without compensation. 2018, there will be no expropriation of land without compensation in 2019. The black masses will be enticed to go to the polls and vote for the ANC. But once they vote for the ANC, there will be no expropriation of land again. I have to let it out because I think black people have not had an opportunity after 1994 to look back at their history and understand what went wrong with their movement.
Yeah, Mr. Matole, I appreciate your views, but we are out of time. And very briefly, Mr. Mahlangu, in the choices that voters have, number one, you have to register, be at least in the system, and to dissuade from voter apathy so that there is a clear outcome either way. But in your view, based on what Mr. Matole was saying, that there is an agenda. If, you know, each political party is not just there for benevolence. It is wanting to drive a particular narrative, and it depends who will the voters decide on.
And the voters must have the ability to look beyond the spin. Mr. Mangosuthu Buthelezi has a strong saying that money is the milk of politics. And the bigger your pockets, the bigger your campaign, and you might draw in a bigger crowd, a bigger traction. But South Africans must have the ability to look at not just the manifestos, but study the policy, study the history, not just the performances and the rhetorics and the slogans, but to really interrogate what could be done, what has been done, and what must be done. And then to go to the ballot box and not just vote for those who brought in the big artists who went to the big stadia, but vote in line with the future of their children. I think South Africans must look beyond the spin shop and vote with policy direction in mind.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Mr. Sifiso Mahlangu, Group Political Editor at ANN7 and our sister publication, and Edward Mitole is a political analyst. And I do hope that you all had equitable time, because time is the enemy of live television. But you at home, thanks indeed for your support. We'll take a break and see you shortly.